Hello everybody! Last class we learned about splint fixation. Then next we will learn another fixation method of external fixation, which is plaster fixation. Plaster fixation is based on the principle that anhydrous calcium sulfate hardness in water forming the crystalline hydrate solid. The type of plaster fixation commonly used in clinic include plaster support, plaster splint, plaster cast, trunk plaster, and special plaster. For limb fracture, commonly used plaster fixation types are plaster support, splint, and cast, and other types are selected according to specific conditions. Let's learn the plaster support first. It is a single support, which can be used as a front support, a back support, or a U-shaped support. It is easy to operate and is relatively light because of less amount of plaster. But due to the limited fixation ability of plaster support, relatively, the immobilization ability of it is insufficient for limbs restraint. Therefore, it is often used for temporary immobilization of injuries or fixation of relatively stable fractures in clinic. The second commonly used method is plaster splint, which has a much firm fixation effect than single support, and is mostly used clinical for limbs that are swollen or may be swollen. The use of plaster strips allows the tightness adjustment of fixation at any time to prevent swelling from affecting the blood circulation of limbs. The third type is plaster cast, also known as caster plaster, which is used in combination with plaster bandage and plaster strip. This method is the most firm. However, once the plaster is shaped, the volume is fixed. Then it will be difficult to adjust the tightness when the limb is seriously swollen, so it should be cautious to use in the acute stage of limb trauma. Other special plaster fixation methods, such as plaster of Paris jacket special made for patients with spinal fracture, and hip plaster special made for patients with hip injuries, and seldom used in clinic, so having a rough idea of them is enough. Under what circumstances can plaster be used for fixation? The following are indications and contraindications of plaster that you should pay attention to. Be sure not to hurry or panic during the clinic operation of plaster fixation.
Plaster fixation method. The plaster is soaked. A plaster bandage is taken and made into plaster strips with 6 to 8 layers according to the required length. The plaster is soaked. The plaster bandage screen is placed in a water basin. The plaster bandage screen is taken out after air bubbles are exhausted. The two ends of the gypsum bandage screen are held. Redundant water is squeezed out. The gypsum strips are smoothed. and then apply to the affected limb, and bandage is wound and fixed. Tubular plaster. A cotton wool sleeve is put on the affected limb. A protective liner is placed. Wrap the soaked plaster bandage from the proximal end to the distal end. Note that the plaster bandage is placed, not wrapped after tightening. Each circle of plaster should press the lower one-third of the previous circle of plaster bandage. Cut out the edge of the lining to make the plaster neat and beautiful. For limbs with different circumferences, you can use your left hand to fold the plaster bandage. Press the application with the right hand. When the plaster is wrapped to a certain height, press the plaster with palm. After fixation, observe the blood supply and activity of the distal end of the affected limb.
Operate step by step and make full preparation before each operation. Let's learn the operation steps of plaster fixation. After plating fracture, swollen limbs easily lead to blood circulatory disorder or crushed skin. In order to protect the skin and other soft tissues of the bone protuberance from crush injury, the pads must be placed before dressing plaster. Now, let's learn the common complications of plaster fixation as follows. Pressure ulcer, ischemic contracture or limb necrosis, nerve injury, dermatitis, muscular atrophy, and joint stiffness, etc. Therefore, the following matters should be paid attention to when operating plaster fixation. So, these are related knowledge points of plaster fixation. I think please practice more in the experiment class. Carefully review and summarize to successfully complete an integral manufacturing process of upper limb plaster. And you should to see the video carefully. And we will see next time. Bye bye.